Good evening and welcome to the Southbridge School Committee meeting on Tuesday, December 11th, 2012. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Agenda item number 2, public input. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak this evening? Thank you. Just state your name and your address, please.
Jill Congdon, 298 High Street, speaking on behalf of the elementary PTA. I just wanted to inform everyone that today and tomorrow, the Southbridge Elementary PTA is doing a dough raiser at Pizzeria Uno, and if you go eat at Pizzeria Uno, Uno's will donate up to 20% of your check to the PTA. Any of these tickets can be found at any of the schools. The students also brought them home. They can be found downstairs on the table of the town hall and in the superintendent's office on the desk. So you just take this ticket into Uno's, hand it to your server, and 20% of your bill will be donated to the elementary PTA today and tomorrow. This also includes takeout as well. The elementary PTA is also in the process of organizing on Friday, February 22nd, elementary students to be able to sing at the Worcester Sharks game, the national anthem, as well as God Bless America. The PTA will be selling tickets to this event. The tickets will be $15, and elementary students will be singing both of those songs during the game. This is also supposed to be Danny Woodhead night, where Danny Woodhead will be there from the Patriots, and he'll be signing autographs as well. So it should be a fun event that we're in the midst of planning and sending out flyers for parents, family members, and students to purchase tickets and come hear their children sing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who'd like to speak this evening? Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 3, meeting call to order. We'll have a roll call, please.
Dr. Domingo? Present. Mrs. Donovan?
Present.
Mr. Lazo?
Present.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present.
Dr. O'Leary?
Present.
Mrs. Principe?
Present.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Present.
7 present.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5, approval of the minutes. The regular school committee minutes for November 13th, 2012. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Principe. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mrs. Donovan. Is there any errors, corrections, or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes? All approved, Max 7 approved. Moving on to the next agenda item, number 6, Chairwoman's announcements. The only announcements I have this evening is to inform that sitting to the left of me is our temporary acting superintendent, Mr. Wiggins. So he's moved over from the right of me, and on the right of me we have Miss Amy Allen, who's here this evening to help us if we have any questions through the curriculum area, which Mr. Wiggins would not be able to help us out this evening on that. Other than that, I have no other announcements, and we will move on to agenda item number 7, which are reports. 1, the representative of the Student Advisory Committee, Ms. Faith Macharia.
Hello everyone. The end of November we had a pep rally which involved all the high school classes, and the seniors won the best skit. We also had a bonfire the following day. Thank you to our firefighters for helping us with that. And we also have started the basketball seasons, and so far the boys and girls varsity have won all their games, so please support them in all their games. Tomorrow, there's the band and chorus are sponsoring a concert. It's a Christmas concert, and all of you are welcome to join. It's free, and so I hope to see you guys there. And it's 7 o'clock at the high school, the new high school. Lastly, a few weeks ago, there was concern among the students about the lack of communication with the new administration, and Ms. Peral took care of that by having an assembly with the juniors and seniors and discussing all their issues. And Mr. Wiggins also came to talk to the student council one morning, and he heard all our concerns, and we're looking forward to every issue being taken care of. Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item number 8, school committee reports. A, curriculum subcommittee, Mrs. Donovan.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to announce that I've posted a curriculum subcommittee meeting for Tuesday, December 18th at 7 p.m. at the room M114 at 25 Cole Avenue. There are 3 items on the agenda. The first one is a discussion of the readathon that will take place at the middle high school in, I think, right after the holidays. The second one will be a discussion of the declamation contest that we'll be also having at the middle high school in the spring of 2013. And then our last discussion will involve creation in the classroom in conjunction with the theory of evolution. Thank you.
Thank you. B, policy subcommittee, Mrs. Principe.
Thank you. I will be scheduling a policy subcommittee meeting. We have a number of policies to review and update, but I think that will be sometime in January. Thank you.
Thank you. C, budget, facilities, and transportation subcommittee, Dr. Domingo.
No report, but a meeting will be scheduled for next week.
Thank you. D, collective bargaining subcommittee, Mrs. Principe.
Thank you. We are in the process of negotiations with the Southbridge Education Association. We have a meeting scheduled for the 9th of January at 5:30 p.m. and also for the 23rd of January for 5 p.m. Thank you.
And thank you. And communications, family, and community engagement, Mrs. McLaughlin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very productive meeting last night with those in attendance. The main thrust of the meeting was to discuss a series of parent forums that the subcommittee is going to be holding in January at all the schools at different times, morning, afternoon, evening, and also throughout the community on schools. More of that will follow. Information will be provided through many different outlets on the school district website, directly to parents through handouts, through public access television, and in the newspaper. So stay tuned for that. That is we're trying to do that to provide a forum for parents to actually to build relationships with parents in the community and guardians in the community, and to provide a forum for them to express any concerns or issues that they may have and they may not want to come and share at this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Donovan.
Excuse me, if I just may, I'm also a member of that subcommittee, and I just wanted to point out that one of the reasons that we're having these types of forum is because we feel there has been in the past a very minimal amount of communication from between the school district and the families, and this is the issue that we're trying to resolve. So in trying to communicate, we're trying to make every effort and every way to communicate to families. And what I wanted to also add is that we will have translators there, and we're also looking into having signers for the hearing impaired. We do have children in our district who are hearing impaired, and it's very important for those families with those special needs that they be heard and they be understood as well. So I just wanted to point out that we're really taking every step we can to reach out a hand to all of our constituents, all of our families, all of our kids, all of our needs, and hopefully that these forums will be a very productive endeavor towards our improvement plan and, again, improving our overall communication with the school district and the families. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 9, introductions. A, Miss Jillian Carroll, Assistant Principal, Southbridge Middle High School.
Ms. Carroll is unable to be with us tonight, so if we could move on to the second introduction. And I know Ms. Kathleen Alicia is with us, if she can come up to the podium. Ms. Alicia is our new food service director, which I'm very thankful for because that is a hat that I can now take off. Kathleen comes to us as a graduate of Johnson & Wales. She has experience as a corporate chef. More particularly, she has experience as a food service director, a school food service director in the state of New York. Maybe most importantly to me, which I was really thrilled when she applied for the job, is she's a graduate from the Southbridge schools. So she is a local girl who has come back to share her expertise, her experience and her energy to help operate and improve our school food service program. So, Kathleen, I know you didn't expect quite this big of a crowd, but if you want to say a few words to the committee and to the group here, by all means, please.
I'd just like to say that I'm very honored to be given this opportunity to give back to the town and to the school that has done so much for me as a child, as a young adult, that helped me to get my foot out there into the world and to become the person I am today. I look forward to all the challenges that are ahead of me, that have been put in front of me already. I'm just ready to go headstrong into it. I'm so happy to be a part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Dr. O'Leary has a question for you.
Question. Not a question, more of a comment. Kathleen, Miss Kathleen, I am excited, probably not as much as you, but really excited to have you with us. Someone that comes from the community, goes out into the world, comes back, wants to give back, just like you said. Really, I'm maybe a little less excited, but we're very excited to have you. Yeah, thank you, and
Thank you very much.
congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice job.
My chair is falling apart. I'm gonna
Talk
fall
to-
off my chair.
Talk to the town manager. Not my job.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 10, which I think there's a lot of people here to observe and enjoy, and that would be our presentations for this evening. And our first presentation this evening is America's White Table, which is presented to us from students of Charlton Street School, grade 5. And I'd like to ask the school committee to join the audience so that we can watch and participate as well.
And while the students come up here and get set up for this, and I'll invite the students to come on up and set up, I would just like to just say to the audience and to the public at home that starting tonight and at every meeting, we're going to be doing some brief student presentations for the committee and for everybody at home so that you can see what's going on in our schools. And I know that in December, while we think about the holidays, that you probably expect something that's Christmas-oriented, but the bottom line is that 4 days ago, was the anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which President Roosevelt at the time said was an attack that will live in infamy. But as it so happens, today I received a letter, and that letter was from Mr. James Pora, who is clearly very proud of his son Bradley, who graduated from Southbridge High last year as an honor student and who won the President's Award. More recently, Bradley graduated from Marine Boot Camp at Paris Island in July, and from Marine Combat Training on November 20th at Camp Lejeune. Mr. Pora and Brad's grandparents deserve, obviously, most of that credit, but Mr. Pora also commended in his letter to me, which was a very touching letter, that Kevin Hill and David Burris and Melanie Baglio of the Southbridge High staff were integral in Brad's success at our school. And it was very touching to have a parent write me and tell me how much they valued what our staff did for their child and their continued success. So as both of these events reinforce my belief that it's never a bad time to honor veterans, I now give you the 5th grade class at the Charlton Street School who's going to give us their play called America's White Table.
Before we begin, I'd just like to thank all the parents and students for coming this evening. Great job, really appreciate it. And you'll also know that your children will be receiving pizza from me Friday, so eat well. And I also like to thank Mike Trombley, the Veterans Agents, have been very supportive of our activities at Charlton Street School, and members of the Marine Corps League in the back. Thank you.
Okay. And I wanted to thank Mr. Montigny for asking the students to come and perform once more to share their civic responsibility. I want to thank the school committee members for having us at their meeting, and again, I wanted to thank all the parents because it means so much to have your children here, and thank you for bringing them. What we did was we took a picture book, America's White Table, and I created a unit out of that. And within that unit, the children learned what Veterans Day was, the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. We tied it into all of the Common Core standards throughout, but most importantly, my number one goal was for the kids to develop an appreciation for our veterans and to understand all that they give selflessly to our country. And my number two goal was for the kids to see that they too can make a difference even at 10 years old, that they modeled their civic responsibility for their classmates, for their peers, and for other members of the community, and they continue to do that this evening, as you will see. So I'm going to leave it all to the kids.
General George Washington once said, "The willingness with which our young are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional as how they perceive to the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated."
Our class would like to perform a skit for you about a very important holiday we celebrate every year on November 11th. Veterans Day is a day set aside and to honor and thank all men and women who are serving or have served in the military, whether during wartime or during a time of peace. It is mainly for men and women who are living to recognize that while they did not die in the line of duty, they too sacrificed much for our freedom.
Veterans Day came to be by the end of World War I. The Allied nations and Germany agreed to stop fighting one another. When two enemies agree to stop fighting, it's called an armistice. The governments of those fighting will later sign a peace treaty to formally stop the war. World War I armistice went into effect of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month on November 11th at 11 a.m. 1918. This day became known as Armistice Day. The next year, President Wilson proclaimed the first Veterans Day.
Our skit is about a tradition called America's White Table that originated during the Vietnam War and is used as a symbol and remembrance for service members held prisoner or missing.
But it brought tears of pride to my Uncle John's eyes. The Veterans Day he came for dinner and stood by it. Set for one person, even though nobody would be eating at it.
It was just a little white table.
What are you doing, Mom? We are setting a little table tonight for Veterans Day, just like the ones that stood across America in the dining halls of the Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Coast Guard since the Vietnam War ended.
What is the table for, Mom?
The tables honor the men and women who served in America's armed forces, especially those missing in action or MIAs, and our POWs, prisoners of war.
It was just a little white table.
But it felt as big as America when we helped Mama put each item on it, and she told us why it was so important.
Why do we use a small table?
We use a small table to show one soldier's lonely battle against many.
Why do we cover it with a white tablecloth?
We cover it with a white cloth to honor a soldier's pure heart when he answers his country's call to duty.
What are you doing with a lemon and salt?
A lemon slice and grains of salt are put on a plate to show a captive soldier's bitter fate and the tears of families waiting for their loved ones to return.
What are you doing with the chair, Mama?
We push an empty chair to the table for the missing soldiers who are not here.
And the napkin. Why is the napkin black?
We lay a black napkin for the sorrow of captivity.
Why are you tipping a glass over?
We turn over a glass for the meal that won't be eaten.
What else goes on the table?
We place a white candle for peace. And a vase tied with a red ribbon and a rose for the hope that all of our missing will return someday.
But that made me want to burst with a feeling I couldn't explain when Mom told us how much our setting the table would mean to the veterans of our country. It was just a little white table. Mama makes a Thanksgiving meal each year to show her gratitude. What can we do to show our gratitude to the veterans?
I'm going to color a picture of all the objects on the table.
I'm going to write out the words of America as tribute in song. What can I do? A 10-year-old girl. Could I ever put anything on the table that was as important as each veteran's gift of freedom is to me? It was just a little white table. I looked at the table all dinner long, and in the quiet inside me, I could almost hear the voices of silent soldiers of the empty chairs saying, "Remember us, please. We are real people like your Uncle John and Mike, who left families and friends, homes and dreams of our own, to protect your birthright of liberty from disappearing as easily as sunlight from glass." It was just a little white table. But it took my words away when I hugged Uncle John good night and wanted to thank him for serving our country so bravely. So I just hugged him even harder and told him I loved him. Uncle John hugged me back even harder than I had hugged him. And that's when I knew what I could put on the table. My promise to put the words from my heart into a little book about America's white table. And in the book, I'd use the pictures and song of my little sister and brother and Mama's story about Uncle John, because I hoped that everyone who read it would set a white table on Veterans Day too. So the brave Americans the little table honors won't ever feel forgotten by the country they loved so much. Then in the salt on the little white table, I trace in the grains of their families' tears what each man and woman who serves America is to me, a hero. And that's when I saw the tears of pride fill my Uncle John's eyes.
John F. Kennedy once said in 1961 in his inaugural address, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, in order to assure the survival and success of liberty. So on your Monday off, remember America's little white table and the veterans who protect our country every day." Thank you, veterans. Will you all rise and join us in singing America?
Before all the children leave, I just want to say thank you to Miss Byron and the 5th grade class. You guys did a wonderful job, and thank you very much for working so hard and thanking the veterans. Have a good night.
Rip my eyes out.
She didn't know she was speaking tonight? She's on the agenda?
Oh, that's right. We get our own little white table book. They did an amazing job.
Sorry. Zoning out.
Let's wait till it quiets down a little bit more. We'll get started.
I just wanted her up here so she could.
She seems like she didn't know she was going to be talking. Okay, thank you. Our next presentation this evening is on world-class instructional design and assessment overview called WIDA. And our presenter tonight is Dr. Sarah Jordan, Director of English Language Learners. Dr. Jordan.
Good evening. I wasn't expecting, I didn't see my name on the agenda, and it was a bit of a surprise to be called up here. I do believe before I went on vacation, I left a message, I left a description of WIDA for you. It's in your packet. So rather than me explain it to you, I'd like to turn it over and ask if there are any questions about it.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Jordan this evening? Has everyone read over? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jordan. I have a bunch. And if you're unprepared, then maybe you can get back to me if you don't have the answer. Okay. My first question was, who will actually issue the test and how will it be administered?
Okay, so you're asking for nuts and bolts. The
Yeah.
WIDA itself is a consortium. It's not a curriculum.
Right.
It drives the assessment. But the assessment itself is published by a company called Metratech. We administer the test. We've actually already sent in our orders for that. So Metratech will send them to us, and the testing date, according to the state, we have a 5-week window between January and February. It gives us 5 weeks to do, it'll probably be a 2-hour test for all students, but the hardest part is figuring out how to do the speaking part. I can do a classroom test, but each speaking part has to be individual, and we're currently working on that schedule. So we administer it, then we submit it back to Metratech, and they should be able to get the results back sooner than the MIPA scores. MIPA came back in September. We need scores earlier, so we're looking
That was my next question. What's the turnaround time for getting the results on that?
I do believe we're looking at May, but I'm not prepared on that question.
My other question was, is this a district-wide initiative, or are you only targeting
It's not an
certain...
initiative. It's not an initiative. This is a state
test.
The state has come down. The state signed the memorandum of understanding at the end of May. Even though we knew for almost a year that this was coming, there were so many logistics to work out at the state level that we actually didn't get the final okay until May.
Okay.
So every single district in the state is doing this.
But is it, are you targeting all your learners at every grade level?
You mean every English language learner?
Yes.
Yes, I have to. My job, the measurement of my job is how students gain in fluency and proficiency. So we have to have an annual test for that. This year it will be hard to measure because the WIDA is apples, and last year we used the MIPA test, which is oranges. But by state law, every single English language learner has to be tested in language proficiency in order to measure growth.
Do you have an idea of how many students we're talking about that will actually be assessed?
267?
Okay.
About.
And my final question is, will the parents be made aware of the test prior to the test being administered, and will the parents also be made aware of the results once they are received by the district?
Yes. It's not a software. We have a contract with a group called Elevations, and part of what Elevations does, besides helping me manage the data for the ELL services, there also are several letters in parent notification in about 90 different languages. So it's very easy to notify parents of upcoming tests and test results. Because we can upload data directly into there, and Elevations is based on WIDA, it'll be very easy to generate information, not just test scores, but what those scores mean in terms of proficiency. I'm still new at this. Elevations is, I'm hiccuping along with there, but I'm going to be using that during this test window.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set. Thank you very much, Dr. Jordan.
You're very welcome. Are there any other questions?
Any other questions this evening? Dr. O'Leary.
Hi, Dr. Jordan, and thank you for coming unexpected and all that. And I appreciate your enthusiasm to go forward with this. I have a couple comments, maybe some trepidation for the whole thing. Do you know, is there a rigorous nature to the research, to the history of WIDA? Is there a long history to it?
Yes. Short answer.
Good.
Well over 10 years. The research that went into it is much older than that. It has a much more rigorous, well, you talk, Tessie, it's much more valid and reliable than the MIPA in that it separates out the strands of proficiency. I know that I talk education really good, but you get me to talk medical, don't speak it. In the same way that students who may speak the mathematical language may do very well, but they may not speak the language of science or social studies, so it does pull apart the different areas of proficiencies that students have as opposed to a general proficiency. The testing that went into the research, let me know what you want. I can certainly pull up the research on it.
It's not, I guess it's not mandatory specific research, Dr. Jordan. I guess my concern is that I haven't been here a whole long time, but I've been here long enough to see that there tends to be a revolving door of the biggest, new, best assessment tool. We just spent tens of thousands of dollars on one over the last 3 years, and that's what we got. And I embrace it. I know that we need to do this, and I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I have to tell you, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I hope that you're as, I don't know what I hope that you are as going in with your eyes wide open with this. I really don't want it to be another one, and I can name them if you want, but
I think there are, at this point, 38 states that are working on the WIDA consortium. It started out with, the reason it's WIDA is because the University of Wisconsin worked with Delaware and Alabama to develop a much more reliable test that gave data back to teachers. A really good assessment drives instruction, and I think this test will drive instruction much better than the MIPA will.
Was you had said that you, in a previous question, that you're talking about the nuts and bolts. I'm pretty certain that part of the failure of one of the last assessment tools was the nuts and bolts of kids getting into the classroom, teachers being there when the kids are taking the test, as evidenced by kids coming out of the classroom and talking to me. So I hope that, I know they're nuts and bolts, and I know that those are little logistics things, but they're going to be important, so let's make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, that's all.
Those are huge logistic issues, especially because there are 3 levels of the test. A is fairly easy. My ELL instructors have those students, so they can set the schedule up. But the B and C tiers have students who get English support services but are in mainstream classrooms, and pulling them out from other classrooms so they're not receiving instruction so that they can take a test is a logistical issue. And in fact, I was just discussing it tonight with the high school teachers. So I am not close to having a schedule because I'm being very careful. So.
Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
welcome, thank you for that.
Dr. D'Amico?
Madam Chair, so clearly you said that this new assessment WIDA is different from what has been used before, MIPA and everything else. And am I right to assume that it will require restructuring of how we deliver instruction? If we are going to be able to assess it better and identify, hopefully through the testing system, where the problems are, do you anticipate a major effort being required to restructure instruction?
Yes, but at this, brief history here. The history of teaching English language learners. We had a bilingual education, which is fairly effective up to a certain point. And then students need to move into sheltered instruction in English, but that's very academic. In 2002, question 2, we got rid of bilingual education, and there were no supports. So we became a sheltered instruction state, and the state mandated that, or suggested, because it really wasn't a mandate, there were no teeth there, that all teachers get trained in sheltered instruction. It didn't happen, and the testing of the students, of the ELLs just fell through the cracks. So what is coming down this year, it's not just a change in testing. There's also a mandate that every single teacher, actually, I'll make this really specific, every single teacher of early education and special education and the core classes in high school will have to get trained in something called retail, which is a 45-hour graduate level class, every single teacher. So yes, the restructuring that we are looking at in this district comes from 2 state mandates, the WIDA which was supposed to drive better instruction in the classroom, and then the teeth behind that is the retail initiative, which was supposed to start in February, but the state has now postponed that till the next February, 2014. So within the district, just as response to these two state events, there will be a lot of work. And already I had my last ELO class tonight. I had 20 teachers in there. The teachers see this coming as well, and they're climbing on board.
Maybe a question for the acting superintendent / more business manager. If we're talking about 45 hours of required professional development per teacher, meaning that those hours those teachers will not be in the classroom, meaning we will have to have substitute teachers in the classroom, this appears to me like a significant financial burden. Has the state, and you probably don't know that, has the state provided any funds to implement this program? Because how are the districts supposed to afford? This is huge. This is potentially a huge financial impact on the district.
It is potentially a huge impact. I think it's one of the things that we're looking at. I think part of the problem right now, to be honest with you, not only for the state, but the state is, as we are, quite frankly, waiting for the federal government to decide what it is doing, okay, with the fiscal cliff. Because much of what the state uses for funds to support any number of initiatives, including this one, as far as professional development incentives, comes from federal funds. And depending on what happens with that, that may or may not make funds available. But yes, this is a mandate that may be unfunded and we may have to pick up. But it is important for us to do this, not simply from the standpoint of the requirement, but again, when we're looking at the focus of the assessments that we're doing and the places where we need to improve student performance, this is an area that is very, very important to our success. It's an integral part of our accelerated improvement plan. So going beyond, okay, what Dr. Jordan is talking about very effectively, I may add, okay, for being unprepared. We need to do this because it's the right thing for these kids.
Has anybody calculated how much that would cost us for our district?
Go ahead.
At a recent staff meeting, we talked about that. We have 2 years to fulfill this. And the actual course, I will be trained in it, and we bring it, and the state pays the trainer. We've figured that if there'll be no recompense to teachers. They have to take this, otherwise they don't get recertified. It's just one of those. And it would be after school. There's no substitutes. It's an after school thing. The summer one, for example, is 6 weeks, July through August. Otherwise it becomes a semester course in the evenings. That's why it's stretched out in order to accommodate people's schedules, because you can't just tell someone in February, hey, you're spending 45 hours with a trainer. What we thought as a district we would do is, within the next budgets, put aside money so that teachers who wanted the graduate level credit from Fitchburg State could be recompensed or reimbursed for that. But as for an actual number, no, not yet.
Well, I have calculated real quick, and it's probably not accurate. We may be looking at the excess of $350,000 to cover the cost. $350,000.
I don't believe it will be that high.
Just based on hours,
Yeah.
45 hours per teacher is required, and I'm assuming it's just teachers, or is it all teaching staff, paraprofessionals, and tutors? Teachers, that's...
If you would like, I could actually submit to you the list of teachers who have to take it, because any teacher who took 2 or more of the category trainings only has a 10-hour course. And the teachers who take the ELL class with me are also eliminated, so I'm reducing that list at this point.
Yeah, the purpose of my question is not to get to the exact dollar amount, is really that this can potentially be a lot more than just a content change for the district, and we will have to grapple.
Certainly as part of the budget process, we will be presenting that to you. I do not believe that it is going to be the impact that you're suggesting. I believe it will be an impact, but much less.
And I sure hope, if any kind of impact that it has, that the state, with the change of mandate, provides the funds. Thank you.
Mr. Lazo?
I think your position and your duties of assessment is paramount, to identify where the strengths and weaknesses are so we know how to handle them. I just hope that this is no bearing on you or the department, but some of us have been on school committee for quite a while, and we've supported assessment right from the beginning. Never did we not support assessment. But under the former curriculum coordinator, we didn't assess much. As far as identifying a problem, going in and straightening it out, we've had some different ideas put in front of us. We supported diligently, and they seem to fall off. Galileo, various other things have been brought in front of us in other ways that they've been aborted. Everyday math, which is a different subject, but basically the same subject. I'm here to support you tonight, but I hope you share our frustration. I personally think that assessment is paramount, but I think what drives education is the teacher in front of the class solving the problem. And I continue to support it. I just think we've got some frustration amongst veteran school committee members. We're hoping that we're heading in the right direction, but as volunteers, it's very frustrating. We put our trust in professionals trained in these areas, and I just hope that it bears fruit. There are other things that we have to change that sometimes I often feel we're backtracking and paying for the real estate twice. If it's a lack of leadership, if it's a lack of knowledge in the top positions feeding down, let's work on it. It's a nice time to get everything together. We're kind of disorganized a little bit, but I think sometimes disorganization will put you on the right path. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you, Dr. Jordan. Thank you. Agenda item 11, report of the temporary acting superintendent, Mr. Wiggins.
I have a bunch of things. And I think it's a pretty positive report, because we have kept the district moving, and I think in a very positive way. Let's start with the Accelerated Improvement Plan. We had our quarterly meeting with Dr. Bonda, and I would say the best way I could sum it up was with the way Dr. Bonda summed it up, and to say that it was the most positive meeting she has had since we've had an Accelerated Improvement Plan. And I want to commend the entire district leadership team for the work that they did to make that so, if I can quote a Star Trek term. But particularly I want to commend Amy Allen, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Assessment, and Paul Livingston, who is our plan coordinator. Is that the plan manager? Plan manager, thank you. I'm terrible with titles. I just call him Paul. But the two of them did a fabulous job in pulling together the evidence, presenting it, bringing the principals and the other administrators into the process, running that meeting. Amy certainly took the lead on running that meeting with Dr. Bonda, and I think it was an extremely positive meeting. Do we still have work to do? Absolutely. Everybody in the district understands that. No one more so than the administrators and the teachers and the staff of this district. But it was extremely positive, and I believe very strongly we are moving forward definitely in the right direction, and definitely on behalf of the kids and the students of this district. We had our professional day recently. I didn't get to all the schools, but I did get over to Charlton Street, where I observed West Street and Charlton Street staffs working together on some of the data that we were working on, that we've gathered, and working on reteaching plans and seeing them work collaboratively. It was exciting to see those teachers pull out different issues to work on reteaching plans. It just was really exciting to see the work that they were doing. I also got to go down and into the library, where a different group were working on vocabulary and how to present vocabulary and get children to grasp vocabulary. Again, very, very exciting things, examples, and just like we should use multiple teaching techniques, the presenters were using multiple teaching techniques with our staff. So exciting to see we use what we say we should use with our kids as well. Eastford Road is an example of things going on there. They've continued their partnership in education of young children with Hyde Tools, a great partnership that we have there, and had a parent training session last Thursday where Dr. Jeffrey Danforth presented a child behavior management program to about 40 parents. My understanding is the parents thought it was absolutely great, would love to see him come back, and they'd like to maybe see that expanded to something on a broader basis, because it was very well received. West Street had its second annual vocational fashion show, as well as a vocabulary fashion show. As very vocational. I used to be a vocational person, so what can I say? And I stopped typing and had to handwrite, so my apologies. And a vocabulary parade, and I got pictures even. I wish I could put them up tonight, because it's complete with a red runway. It's great. They've also been celebrating National Novel Month. Charlton Street has its ongoing food drive for the community connections. It, like all of the elementary schools, has been doing its second round of ELA assessments with ANET. They also wanted to remind me that the Charlton Street Winter Concert, I didn't hear what West Street's is, but the Charlton Street Winter Concert is going to be on Friday, December 21st. I'm guessing West Street's probably going to be the same day. Yeah, okay. So both concerts at those elementary schools will be on December 21st. And then finally, what I think is positive, we have had ongoing discussions in this room about the change in menu offerings based on the new federal regulations, and in particular the restrictions in protein and grain that can be offered. And I am pleased to tell you that the hue and cry that has been happening nationally caused last Friday for the federal government to basically abandon the restrictions on protein and grains. Now, they still have the calorie restrictions, and I think that's understandable. I think everybody understands that. But we no longer have to restrict proteins and grains. The protein restriction, for example, was 2 ounces a day. So while we do have to work with the calories, we can now revamp our menus. The other thing that we've been working with the state on is we found out in a meeting I had with them back in November, towards the end of November, is that Southbridge may qualify for to provide an after-school snack program, which would be 100% funded by the state. So again, we're going to be working on that. My new food service director is on top of that as one of her early issues to address. So I think that concludes the acting superintendent's report for this evening.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Mr. Lazo?
More of a comment. I'd just like to thank Terry for the line of communication to the school committee. I don't know how the other members are, but I have to say that the communication under Terry Wiggins has been fantastic. It's been a great short time, so to speak, to work with Terry, and his honesty and his integrity is always first and foremost. Terry, I just want to thank you for serving in that capacity. I hope you continue.
Anyone else? Dr. O'Leary.
Just want to reiterate what my colleague said. Thanks, Terry.
Anyone else? Moving on to agenda item number 12, report of Director of Finance and Operations financial report for fiscal year 2013. Mr. Wiggins.
I believe I switch hats now. In your packet was a financial report, and unlike some of your other financial reports, in this, to the very right-hand side, were two gray columns, which were transfers in and transfers out. You'll recall at the last meeting I indicated that I would provide you with a list of proposed transfers by line item. And this being the first transfer, and admittedly a transfer that should have happened earlier, to be honest, is rather substantial. And I would say, in addition to, there's a lot of lines here, but I would say one of the things I kind of went back, because there's really kind of three general areas that you can kind of break this down into. The first, and I know nobody brought their March budget that you approved, but if you go back and you kind of think about the March 28th budget that you approved, you'll recall at the time we did not know exactly how the first graders were going to the first grade teachers rather, were going to move out into the various schools at that time. And so there was a line on that budget that was $732,397, okay? And that was the value of the teachers at that time that were going to have to be moved. And so When you look at this $1.5 million, $732,000 of this really relates to the moves of those teachers. And then there are various moves in salary areas that relate to the salary adjustment account, which is $432,013. Okay, some of those are raises, there are other adjustments that happen in there. And then there is another $332, I think it is, and 97 cents. That is dealing with adjustments for some contracted services, tuitions, and some projected expenditures in light of recent events. And that's really the bulk of how this $1.5 million transfer breaks down in a kind of a simplistic sense. And again, I really do have to offer my apologies, both to the committee and to the public. These transfers really should have happened earlier. That's on me, and I, certainly take the responsibility for that. Are there any questions?
Dr. D'Amico?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Terry. I brought this question up last time, and this is really something I would like to put on the agenda for next week for the budget subcommittee meeting. I have the feeling that we have lost the oversight over what is happening with instructional salaries, how are our programs structured to justify the numbers that we are seeing in these budgets. The number clearly has not changed, nor should it within a month. But projecting that we will need more than $500,000 over what we have projected for salaries concerns me greatly. On average, that would be 10 new positions that I don't remember approving a single one of them. And that's important because those are positions that come from operating budgets. They will keep repeating themselves next year, next year, next year. And I think this is a serious issue that we need to discuss, especially now that we've reconfigured some schools, United Middle and High School. I really would like us to understand better how programming is happening in these buildings, what justifies the increase in number of staff, and how potentially we're going to deal this in longer term. And that will go with the vote as well that is coming. I'm not sure that I'm ready to support these recommendations until I feel a lot more comfortable in the programming that is requiring these additional staffing positions. Thank you.
Any other? Mr. Lazo? Did you have your hand up? Oh, Mrs. Principe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Dr. Domingo. I don't think that I am going to vote on these transfers this evening. I have many, many questions about these transfers. It's just line item after line item, so I would like to have more detailed explanation for this before I vote it. So I agree with Dr. Domingo. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Lazo?
I share the same feeling of the two previous speakers, but I'm swallowing hard on this one because I understand what we went through the summer, through the first 30 days before we went to school, and the past few months that we've done it. It's been put a fire out, lack of management. Since Terry has taken over, I think he has, even before he took over, he did a tremendous amount of duties that did not relate to his position. And I think now that he has two hats on, he sees the deficiencies and sees the light on where we have to move. I do agree with the two previous speakers. Terry, if we do have time to revisit it at subcommittee, fine. If there is an emergency of some sort budgetarily that we need to get this in there to pay the help or something to that effect, I would vote in favor of it. But I yield. This year is tough. But I do understand the situation getting to this point. This is what's making me feel like let's take care of this problem. And I don't think it'll happen again because the particular person creates this problem is not here.
Mr. Wiggins?
I don't think there's any, at this point again, I don't think there's any particular urgency. I think certainly what I might suggest is that in advance of the meeting that the subcommittee chair is going to schedule. I can send out the latest recast budget, which gives the detail, the listing of every individual salary, every individual person, which I think will give some answers to your questions. There are other answers that I can address individually in that subcommittee meeting, and then we could revisit this at the January meeting.
Dr. D'Amico?
Add to this, it's much less important to me, and I think to all of us, to see the names written. It's really the programming issue. If we have, for example, if we have a high school English program of certain number of courses that have been delivered for 20 years, and all of a sudden we notice that over the time the number of positions required to deliver that has changed from 5 to 8, and the students have declined by 100, that would definitely need some kind of explanation. I'm not saying it's unreasonable.
Okay.
Courses may have been added, we have, I don't know, a million things could have happened. So content-wise, by a program or by the grade or by any way that is easy to address special education, ELL per building, names to me are the
No,
last.
well, no, actually, I think I do know what you're asking, and in other districts, what I have done, actually, again, before now, is, for example, you would have gotten sort of a class breakdown. And so, for example, you would see sort of a teacher-student ratio, and at a middle high school level, you would see, you know, for example, we have X science classes, and this is the number of students in those classes. At the elementary level, it would probably be a little bit more basic, the number of students in fifth grade, in so many fifth grade classes, fourth grade classes, so forth. I think we can probably come up with that for you.
I think that would be satisfactory. Thank you.
Mr. Lazo?
One of the things I requested from the previous superintendent who was on leave was a student-teacher ratio. Even if we did it in sections, say we did the high school and the middle school, or middle high school together, and then looked at the elementary buildings, because what's happening is there are positions that we'd like to expand and add, but then at the same time, we have classes that the numbers are too high, and I think that when we do budget, and I understand we can read the ed formula on what our job is, what your job is, that's all wonderful and everything, but it doesn't always work that way. It's making the school committee understand what we have as a student-teacher ratio, because to me, I think putting, say hypothetically, there's 30 kids in a classroom, one teacher, no associate, and then all of a sudden we're going to expand some program without maintaining an AP course or a math science course. As far as we were very proud a few years ago that nothing was over 21 students to a teacher, and now all of a sudden we have these bulges, and it's not because an administrator didn't ask for those positions, because I know at the middle high school they were asked for a year ago, and the superintendent saw fit that it wasn't needed. And I think the school committee at least has to know, because if we're going to fund something, knowing where this funding's going, how it's going to impact the actual education, and I think we have a very, very qualified curriculum coordinator. And I think we have to do this as a team, not as individuals where one person just says, you don't need this, you don't need that, I'm doing this. That's not the way I think it should work, and I think that you're not like that anyway, so I think I'd like to have that student-teacher ratio kind of worked into these budget numbers. Thank you.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
We, to date, have only had one budget subcommittee meeting, and my question, which has been asked and answered, I believe, was would a delay in a vote on this until after a budget subcommittee meeting occurred present a problem for the district? And as I understand it, you're saying no. So that would just be my preference, is to see that and really go through the meat of this before we take action. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Donovan?
I have one question and one need for clarification. Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Wiggin. How often are these transfers done? I know you apologize for the delay, but are these ongoing or?
The way the process should work, and again, my apologies, it has not worked the way it should, is when I anticipate that there is going to be a need for additional money in a line, then I should be proposing those to you in advance before those expenditures happen. This year was a unique year on multiple fronts, which is probably an understatement for me to say. The biggest, however, or the biggest two, were the opening of the new school and the fact that we restructured our elementary level And what that meant is we were moving teachers around, and we literally moved teachers around. It wasn't even as simple as saying we moved teachers out of Eastford Road to West Street and Charlton Street, because we moved teachers between West Street and Charlton Street. So we were, and for that matter, we moved teachers from the elementary level to the middle high school. So we really had literally a shell game going on all over the district. And what we wanted to do before we did a transfer list for you is we wanted to make sure that we could tell you exactly where every single body was, and of course the corresponding salary. And I talk a lot about the teachers because of course that is the biggest piece of salary, but it included paraprofessionals. In some places it included custodians, it included food service workers. Really every employment group that you have, we had movement. And so that was really kind of the unique challenge that we had this year. Not making excuses. Again, what should be, should be. But that was really kind of what we were up against.
And just one thing that I wanted to have clarified, just from our last meeting and then up until our memo from you for tonight's meeting. At our last meeting, you had given us that there was a projected positive fund balance of $23,000 and some change by the end of June. And at that time, you made us aware of that budget amount, but projection amount, I should say, and that you were not going to put a freeze on anything. This time, it says that you have put a freeze, and I just wanted to clarify, when did that take place, and is that the case of what you have in fact done?
I have put a freeze into effect. I put it into effect the day Mr. Ely was put on leave.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on. Our next agenda item, number 13, is school committee actions. We do have several here, so we'll start with A. Move that the Southbridge School Committee appoint Southbridge Police Officer and School Resource Officer Robert Campbell, Southbridge Police Sergeant Jose Dingy, and Southbridge Police Detective Robert Salisbury as attendance supervisors for the Southbridge Public Schools pursuant to MGL Chapter 76, Section 19.
May I request we divide the question?
Sure, I think you'd have to make an amendment.
Okay. Just by disclosure, I am related to one of these people through marriage, so I just don't want to make a vote. So I'd like to divide the question. I don't feel that I need to abstain on all of them, but so I would like to divide the question if possible.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the motion to separate the votes due to conflict with Mrs. McLaughlin and being relative to one of the gentlemen. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion on that? Seeing none. Roll call.
I'm confused, Mrs. Chair. You want to amend to make this 3 different questions? Is that the amendment?
Yes,
Just to separate
to make
this
it
by the
3
different-
separate.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo? Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary? Yes. Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
7 yes.
Okay. So A will read, moved that the Southbridge School Committee appoint Southbridge Police Officer and School Resource Officer Robert Campbell as an attendance supervisor for the Southbridge Public Schools pursuant to MGL Chapter 76, Section 19.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Donovan.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, go right ahead.
First of all, I'm not even sure where to start. I guess I'm going to start at the end of our memo. The last part of the sentence above the recommendation was that, we wanted to appoint these 3 officers, and then at some point we may be asked to review current policy or adopt a new policy to provide additional guidance for these officers. So when I first read that, being new, I thought, geez, what is our current policy? So I brought my big book here. I couldn't find it. So I don't even know what is the policy to begin with. And then once I know that, then probably the rest of my questions will be answered. But before I even know what the policy is, I got to start there, and then my questions will follow if somebody can enlighten me, starting at that point A.
Mr. Wiggins?
Well, I think your research is the same as my research ultimately ended up being, is that you're asked by law to develop a policy. There isn't a policy, so we do need to develop a policy.
Do not have
You
one
do
currently.
not currently have a policy. Now,
Okay.
most of the duties are actually prescribed by law and regulation, but as is often the case in law and regulation, you are still required to have a policy. So we do need to develop one, and the chair of the subcommittee on policy has indicated she is going to call a meeting of the policy committee. That will be one of the first things that I will recommend be addressed, is that we do develop a policy essentially on what is more commonly called truancy for the district. But in absence of that, I did speak with our counsel on this, and I did speak with Chief Charette, and we will be able to enforce the statute. And these officers serving as attendant supervisors, or again, the common term is usually the truant officer, will be able to enforce the statute if they are appointed by the committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that. My next question is, do we only have one current truant officer, or do we have multiple?
You have one current truant officer, and you are sitting next to him.
I'm not going to look here, so I'm going to look here.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Let's see.
And I would really like to remove another hat if I could.
My next question was, would these three people that we're looking to appoint this evening, are we talking district-wide truancy, or are we only looking at a specific school?
No, we are looking at district-wide.
Okay. And right now, the person that who now does it, are you doing it on a district-wide basis now?
I am doing it by virtue of, if you do not have an attendant supervisor, the superintendent of schools is your truant officer or attendant supervisor.
Okay. Okay, the next thing I wanted to talk about was their compensation. The memo said that their compensation would be based upon the time involved with each case on a case-by-case basis on the officer's rate of pay. And my question is it a rate of pay that each officer currently receives based on their level, or is it a billing rate that they are able to bill the town at, which is different from their normal compensation rate?
Well, I've actually talked with Chief Charette a little bit about that, and it will probably be a flat rate, and it will probably be a nominal one, because a lot of this will happen in the course of their normal duties. One of the reasons for having multiple officers is so, for example, if the officer is out patrolling, he's in his cruiser, he sees a student that he believes looks like they should be in school. That is part of the course of their normal duties, that they can stop that student, and under the law, they can stop that student. They do not need a warrant to stop that student. Then say, are you supposed to be in school? Then they can in turn take that student and bring them to school.
I think that's a good idea, because one of my questions was how are you going to log on a case-by-case basis at what point that officer started the action of driving around or noticing a person, and that just gets too convoluted.
Right, and in the case of one of the officers, our school resource officer, we are already paying, obviously, part of that person's salary.
Okay. The other thing I kind of jumped out at me was that, having multiple supervisors, like you had just mentioned, if any of these officers happens to see a student that appears that he or she should be in school, they're able to address that. But is there other ways that these children will be identified, or is it just per chance you're driving down Cole Ave and you see somebody at the corner?
Oh, no.
We have a way of identifying these
Well,
kids?
once you have an identified truant officer, then you publicize that, and there are various ways. In other words, you could have, I've had parents identify their own children. I've had the public, that they know that such and so can be contacted. So there's a variety of ways that community, once you have officers appointed and the public is aware of who those officers are, that truant students can be identified. It's not a you try not to make it such that everybody is looking around the corner and making it like a police state, but it is something where you get some heightened awareness. And again, I think that for the most part, once you have truant officers, particularly multiple officers, and when you incorporate your local safety officials into this program, you will find that in and of itself is somewhat of a deterrent to truancy. Because, again, if a police officer is your truant officer, then that means that as that cruiser is going by, that might also be the truant officer.
Do you happen to know what our truancy rate is? Is it?
I do not have that statistic, and I apologize. I had meant to get that, and I did not get that before this evening.
And then my final question would be, I'm just going to jump back to the compensation. Even if you do establish a flat rate with Chief Charette, from what budget item will that be paid through, or how? I mean, we're looking at transfers and freezes. Where will that money come from?
We have a contracted service line, and there's always a sum of money that we budget for contracted services, and it will come out of that line.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You've answered all my questions. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Principe?
I think Mr. Lazo. has
Mr.
done it
Lazo first? Okay, Mr. Lazo?
A couple of things. The truancy officer, once appointed, he becomes the go-to guy. I think one of the big pieces of truancy that we have to add to this is that your administration and your schools know who are absent and who is abusing the ability not to go to school. And I think what happens is the truancy officer becomes a regular communication, a line of communication, I should say, to the administration and the schools respectively. That's basically where they really identify most of the truancy. I think the small piece of truancy is that when you have somebody like Sergeant Dingy or say the other two gentlemen, Campbell and Salisbury, they know these kids, they work with these kids, and when they see them walking down the street, it's a pretty easy read that,
right.
Geez, I coached that kid or something, right. And then after they bring them in, but they'll check with administration if they're excused. That's the truancy piece. The salary piece, I'm confused because, Terry, this question's kind of to you. I'm not sure that the chief can control the union contract. If you have a sergeant on a pay scale, one of these gentlemen is a sergeant, he's on a pay scale, I think he's going to be a great truancy officer, but I thought that they're driven because in Pop Warner we hire a detail, they're based off of their Quinn pay, their educational and background with the Quinn pay, and their salaries for years in, much like our teacher's contract. So if we can get a flat rate, I would be very impressed, and that's one part of it. The second part of it is, does the police department of Townside share any expense with us like we used to, or do we pick it all up now?
Well, again, I think that's one of the things I know obviously there's been some ongoing negotiations that they've been having, and I think that's one of the reasons at the time of the writing we weren't necessarily able to come up with a clear figure for you. But again, the chief and I have been having, in fact, we had a little, well, actually it wasn't about this, it was something different, but we've been talking ongoing about this, and he feels that because some of this is going to happen as part of their regular duties, and again, at least one of these three gentlemen obviously is already, if you will, employed by us. We are already paying part of that salary. That really what we're talking about, it's going to have to be probably, and neither of us really could kind of come up with something, but it's going to probably have to be something that's out of the ordinary for them to be coming and needing to bill us for it. For example, there could be a situation where you have a truant student and there might be some kind of court involvement. In that case, there might be hours outside of the normal case, and that's where there might be a billing. Okay?
My fourth and final issue is the superintendent would remain head of truancy. Am I correct in saying that? Or
Yes.
are these duties going to leave completely?
Well, your superintendent of schools is ultimately always responsible for everything that happens in the schools.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Allen?
As principal of Wells, I just want to address the truancy and the pay, because I know when Officer Campbell was our resource officer, and we had other resource officers come in to sub or whatever the case may be, we had to pay that officer at their rate of pay for the 50% that we were paying. So I believe we do definitely have to pay them at their own rate. Also, as far as the truancy goes, I know at Wells, when students were parents didn't call in or we didn't get a note for a student that was absent, the administrative secretaries would call the home. If they couldn't get in touch with anybody, we assumed that student was truant, and we sent somebody to find them, or we tried to get in touch with the parent at work. Where's your child? If they didn't know, they could give us an idea. Sometimes our social worker would go look, sometimes our resource officer, depending if he was there or not.
Thank you. Mrs. Principe, did you have?
It's been covered
Okay.
by both.
Dr. D'Amico, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, this is a little surprising topic to me, because the underlying sentence here says that this appointment shall give them the power to apprehend and take to school without a warrant any truant or absentee found wandering in the streets or public places. Well, that's by definition what law enforcement does anyway. So appointing police officers to do their job, for which then we as a school department have to pay, seems rather silly. I don't think that police officers need to be appointed to enforce the law. That's what they do during their normal hours. I know that if they're called on our behalf, they need to do a job, but they would do it on behalf of anybody if they're called by anybody else. They serve for the interest of public. So I really don't understand how come that now school department needs to be paying for part of the salary for something that we probably should expect from them anyway.
Yes, Mr. Wiggins, go ahead.
The school committee is required by law to appoint attendance supervisors. Well, that's why I quoted the law to you. And I underlined that law simply so that you understand whether it's police officers or it's me, that your truant officer, if you will, your attendance supervisor, you know, can take that student into custody without a warrant. Okay, the fact that we're using police officers, which is the very common practice in Massachusetts and most states now, where there are police departments, is simply a vehicle. But you could, you know, for example, in Concord, New Hampshire, again, different laws, but essentially more or less the same. The practice there was to hire retired police officers. But again, they had the same sort of powers.
No, and I understand that. It's just a question of payment. I mean, it appears that we're appointing police officers to do the job that they do anyway, so why do we have to pay them for something that's part of the job?
Dr. O'Leary, I believe you had your hand up first.
Mr. Lazo being as enthusiastic as he is over there.
It's simple, my fellow colleagues. It's like the police officer that is the liquor licensing appointee. Although he is a police officer that enforces the law under all the Massachusetts general laws and local bylaws, he has a special empowerment of a liquor licensing official. A truancy officer, this law here empowers him with special powers to carry out the job of the truancy officer, which is actually the superintendent. It's like deputizing somebody in truancy. It's a specialty area. It's not a common, every police officer can do it. Once you empower 3 gentlemen to do this, there's special duties above and beyond the actual law enforcement job that they have. And you'll notice in our fire department, police department, there are special duties that are pointed to certain officers, whether they be an inspector or liquor agent or a truancy officer. It empowers them and gives them the leverage to do what they have to do under this law.
Dr. O'Leary, did you have anything?
Yeah, thank you, and maybe it's already been answered. My curiosity is the same. If most of the stuff happens during regular hours, you said, Terry, school is during regular hours, I guess it's 3 to 11, 11 to 7 police shifts, but those guys aren't going to be doing truancy at 3 to 11, 11 to 7. So I guess I'm having trouble, unless it's like Mr. Lazo said, just the nature of being compensated for that knowledge or that ability is one thing, but to be paid your regular day and then to get money on top of that for doing that.
No, again, my understanding, and I understand what Amy said, and I agree with her 100%. In the conversation I had with the chief, the issue was more if they had to do something outside of their regular shift. Okay? In other words, if they had to go, and again, sometimes when you have truancy, if it's a simple issue, they're on their shift, okay, or they're
7 to 3 and something happens, they're just getting paid regular rate.
Right. The issue comes if the truancy is a more complex issue where there may be court involvement, they have to go to court outside their shift. In those situations, there would have to be some additional compensation involved.
Excellent clarification. I appreciate that, Terry. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Oh, Mrs. Principe, sorry.
I will support these three individuals, but I will say I'd like to keep an eye on the compensation. Because I don't know how active we are with truancy. I mean, how many cases do we have? Are we at, the homes of these students every day, every week? So I'd like to keep an eye on this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Lazo?
Terry, do you have an idea budgetarily? Has anybody talked to the administration to just see what our truancy rate is, what our truancy problems are, translate that into some sort of average salary line to find out what that budget line is going to be, or are we just putting a chunk of money in and hoping that it works?
I'll be honest with you, what my experience has been in past districts is every year, when you have your organization meeting, there's a series of motions that take place, and one of them is to appoint your truant officer. Since I've been here, we haven't appointed a truant officer, and to the best of my knowledge here in central office, now again, I've been occupied with some other things, I'm not aware that central office at least has tracked those statistics. So I think in addition to having the truant officers, I think in this discussion tonight that one of the important things we do is to track truancy, not simply for the finances, but I think it's an important discussion educationally. We do need to find out what our truancy is, and we need to find out what that impact is, obviously, on student learning.
So we're going to vote tonight to put these three gentlemen in. My question isn't the three gentlemen. My question is the financial portion that we are going to monitor this.
Absolutely.
It won't be a budget buster, and that's basically what you're saying to us?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Domingo?
Hopefully a last question. Are we appointing three because we need three at any given time, or do we believe they're interchangeable and only one at any given time will be used?
Well, what Chief Charette suggested to me is having the three gives flexibility so that it's a situation that if any one of them happens to be traveling down the street, okay, he doesn't have to call somebody else. He can take action.
Thank you.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes, thank you. Just one last final comment through you to Mrs. Principe as chair of the policy. I think I'd like to recommend that we look at this and create a policy for this.
Wrote it down.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Seeing none, can we have a roll call on this, Max, please?
Mrs. Donovan?
Well, are we doing them individually?
Yeah, this is the first one.
The first one of Mr. Campbell?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
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 Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. Domingo?
No.
6 yes, 1 no.
Motion passes. All right, our second one is moved that the Southbridge School Committee appoint Southbridge Police Sergeant Jose Dingy as attendance supervisor for the Southbridge Public School pursuant to MGL Chapter 76, Section 19. I have a motion by Scott, seconded by Mrs. Principe. Dr. O'Leary, excuse me, is there any discussion on this one? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. Domingo?
No.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Motion passes. Third one, move that the Southbridge School Committee appoint Police Detective Robert Salisbury as attendance supervisor of the Southbridge Public Schools pursuant to MGL Chapter 76, Section 19. I have a motion. Motion by Mrs. Principe, seconded by Mr. Lazo. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Abstain?
Okay. Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. Domingo?
No.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
5 yes, 1 no, 1 abstain.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Madam Superintendent, am I to understand that this is going to go to policy now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for calling me Madam Superintendent. My ego's gonna go up a little higher now. No. All right. B, vote to approve a middle high school science teacher position. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have, Thank you. I have a motion by Mrs. Principe, second by Dr. D'Amico, and do we have discussion? Dr. D'Amico?
I think a common sentiment expressed before is unless this is detrimental for budgetary or regulatory issues, that the following items be discussed first in the subcommittee next week. I don't know how to deal with this, but I would make a motion to table the vote until the next regular school committee meeting. Is that the way to do it?
I think we would postpone it better than table, because if we
Okay,
table it,
postpone.
we have to do it at the very next, and if we have any issues. So I would like to, if we could, postpone it.
I'll make a motion to postpone until the next regular school committee meeting.
All right, so we have a motion to postpone and a seconded. Any discussion on the postponement? Mr. Wiggins?
Well, you'll do a committee member first.
Well, I
Mrs.
was
Principe?
going to ask Terry to speak to this issue, because we've discussed this for a while now, the science position. So if you could bring it up again.
Mr. Wiggins?
This position is not a new discussion. This position was talked about in several meetings before. It's been talked about outside of these chambers. Quite frankly, the search for this position has taken some time. It didn't get acted on by the previous superintendent. It really, I thought, was a very pressing need to bring forward to you tonight. It is impacting the education of students. And one of the things that the administration and the staff and the teachers hear from me all the time is that as long as I am doing this, for as little as long as it will be, you know, one of my thoughts, first and foremost, has to be how am I going to positively impact the students of this district? And right now, one of the 4 positions that are put forward before you tonight is this science teacher. And I think it's very important that this gets done. Understand, I'm still, if you pass this tonight, I'm not going to be able to have this teacher on board before January 2nd. If we do, and I understand your concern, but if we wait until next week, then that means that we will have a vote in January. That means I will not have this teacher on board probably until February.
Thank you. All right, so.
I don't know.
Dr. O'Leary?
Madam Chair, to Terry, do you know, is there a certain segment of the middle high school students that he'll be teaching, or run across all?
You actually have a schedule in your packet, and it's a mix of middle and high school. I believe there's one grade 8 science. There is an environmental biology in grade 9, and then there are 3 grade 11 courses of biology, or I guess they're all, no, 2 biologies and a diversity and natural selection, which right now is being covered by the department head.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Donovan?
Thank you. 2 questions and then a clarification on payment. The chart that you just read through you to Mr. Wiggin, the chart that you just read through stating the subjects that this teacher would be required to teach, is this chart the job description?
This is what the teacher will do. I will tell you that one of the things in preparing this work is I recognize that we are woefully lacking in job descriptions. We need to work on that as a district. It is a priority of mine. You'll note that in the new positions, we did develop job descriptions for you. We're not able to come up with a job description for this position because we have several established science teachers. We elected instead to give you the schedule that we knew this teacher would teach. And I do apologize for not having a job description for this as well.
Why I still have the floor. If you could just clarify the heading of this chart. I was a little confused with those 2 abbreviations at the top. I'm thinking the second one probably should have been omitted. Southbridge Middle High School, and then there was that MHHS.
Yeah, I think...
Dr. O'Leary, just hold on for a minute. Let Mr. Wiggins answer.
I believe the word for that is typographical error.
So
That's 2 words, but...
All right, I just wanted to make sure that it didn't belong there. And then finally, relative to paying for the position, you had in our the memo that you had provided that this position would be paid for from the contingency fund that had been set aside in the budget specifically for this purpose, that you had originally set aside $53,000, and now you're projecting approximately $32,000 would be used. is that budget is the one that got passed in the previous fiscal year, and that contingency fund is still there with the money in there, is that correct?
Correct, and in built into the transfers that were put
Okay.
before you and that will be discussed in the subcommittee, that's part of those transfers.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm all set, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Lazo?
Terry, I'm in favor of voting for the two teachers. I'm not quite understanding the interventionist positions. It's a little different. It's more staffing. It's more assistance. We've got more support staff. We put in a tremendous amount of support staff from the front office down to the custodians as far as support underneath the actual positions. I am voting in favor of this, Terry, and I do see the typo, but I know what you're saying. When you printed up this grid, I think it's needed, and I think that we have a couple other areas on the 9 through 12. They're a little heavy on student-teacher ratio, but we'll decide that later as far as tackling the problem. But tonight I'll be voting yes on this position and the SPED position, but I don't think I'll be voting on the middle two unless somebody can justify it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, so our motion to postpone was canceled, so we're back to the original motion by Dr. Domingo, seconded by Mr. Lazo, to vote to approve a middle high school science teacher position. Can we have a roll call on that, please?
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes?
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
7 yes.
Motion passes. C, you're welcome. Vote to approve a middle school LEP interventionist position. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Principe. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. McLaughlin. Discussion, Mrs. Principe.
Yes, through you to Mr. Wigan, would you explain the funding for this position and actually as it applies to the following two with the mathematics interventionist position and special ed?
Yeah, actually, the next three positions, really. The next three positions will be funded by the Title IIA carryover from FY12. You'll recall that last year we did not get this grant. Prior to writing this memo, I had a conversation with the Title IIA grant folks and wanted to assure that we were going to get this grant. We were indeed assured that we were going to get it. The grant was on the security portal. Amy Allen has been writing that grant. She has written in these three salaries. They are consistent with the goals of this grant. They are certainly consistent with not only our accelerated improvement plan, but more importantly, with the data that we have. You'll recall at your last meeting, we presented you ANET data regarding math scores at the middle school level, and they were very troubling. We presented you ELA scores at the middle school level, and they were very troubling. And we presented you with the subgroups, and one of those subgroups was our limited English proficiency students, and they were very troubling. And we as a leadership team came together, and we said, what do we do about this? Because again, everything we do is about improving student performance. It has to be. That has to be our focus. And we, to a person, said we need to intervene directly with these students. And we came up with the concept of really three positions, and this being one position where we would have somebody who could intervene directly with struggling students, who could also work, after working with those struggling students, could work almost also as a team teacher with teachers in the classroom. So individually with students, with small groups of students, as a team teacher with students, and yes, in some cases working with strategies for students so that when they're not in that classroom, that other students can succeed in this group. With the math, very much the same. And then with both of these positions, also coordinating the assessments that need to take place for these. In the third position, it's a little different because we have the Wilson-trained teacher on board. But right now, because of the population at the school, we need to have her tied up with special education. So we're writing her salary into the grant as a Wilson teacher because we couldn't hire a Wilson-trained teacher right now to work on our ELA needs at the middle school. But we can find a special education teacher. So the grant is actually going to pay for the existing Wilson teacher, okay? And then we'll basically take the budget money that will be freed up and pay for the special ed teacher.
Mrs. Principe, any more?
Actually, yes, if I could just continue a little. I asked Mr. Wigan about the funding. I really wanted to ask Ms. Allen about the need for the interventionists. I know Mr. Wigan just spoke of it. Is there anything you'd like to add to that information that he gave us?
Well, as you saw by my prior presentation, both the MCAS and the ANET scores reflected that we, particularly at the 6th and 7th grade level, need help with the SPED and ELL populations, and also the math scores. Our math scores were quite low in those grades. Our special ed and ELL students scored well below average. So what we're looking to do with these interventionist positions is to get teachers that have used intervention processes and get them into the classrooms and take small groups out. It's to help the regular classroom teachers differentiate, pull small groups out, or go in and work with a small group within the classroom, even co-teach with the teachers to give the kids different approaches to doing math or to doing with the special ed teacher to doing ELA and literacy strategies. We need to get more interventions in the classroom. Obviously with ELL, I know Dr. Jordan could speak to, we definitely need more ELL staffing. We're not in compliance with the number of ELL students we have in the classroom with the classroom teachers. This would really help and give those students the added English proficiency that they need in the classroom. The math particularly, I know we have almost our whole math department over here that came to support this position, and any of them would be happy to speak to you about how important it is that we get this additional help in the math classrooms, particularly at this middle school level before they get to high school.
Thank you. I do have one more, but I will yield to Mr. Lazo.
Oh, are these all typos? Middle school LEP, middle school mathematics, middle school. We still have the middle school?
This is at the middle school level.
Oh, so there is two different operations under one roof. Thank you for confirming that for me. I've been arguing that for a couple of months now. Let's look at, I'm very happy about the grant. It's nice when you get a grant, you get money to pay for a position. My tug of war with this is this. As the previous speaker said, Tom O'Leary, Doc, he said, this is the latest and the greatest. We've got a new name for it. It's not a paraprofessional. It's not a teacher. It's something else now. At Southbridge High School, the left side of the building, we have so many assistants in a classroom that an average student has a hard time concentrating on their education. Now we're going to add some more intervention with this whole programming that we have at the, whatever you want to call it, middle high school, or whatever. I think that what we have is a severe mismanagement at the building level. And I think what's happening is...
Point of order. This is a personnel issue now, please.
I'm talking about the management of the building, why the building's overcrowded.
Mr. Lazo?
That's not a personnel issue.
Point of order taken, Mr. Lazo. We're talking about the positions, not how we're managing the school, please.
Let me rephrase that for you so it doesn't...
We're
talk
voting
about
on the
management.
position.
Let's not identify the problem. Let's make believe we don't know it's there. Okay.
This
When
isn't
you
the
turn
time,
around
excuse
and
me,
you look
Mr.
at
Lazo, it's not the time to
school
identify it.
itself, and you talk about the actual classes, and you say that it's overcrowded. We've taken every program and threw it into that middle high school when some of these programs weren't supposed to be at the high school. I don't know who did that. We're not supposed to talk about that because it's a personnel issue. But it's bulging. We're creating bigger problems, and we're putting more problems into the building. While we chase our tail to solve the problems, we're going to create more problems only to find out in 2 months that we'll probably need something else to save the other problem. So I've been chasing my tail with this middle high school, and we spent 10 years designing it. It's not being used properly. Now, say whoever's going to do what, person I'll discuss later. I just have a hard problem with the next latest and greatest that's going to be thrown at this problem that we have, instead of just putting qualified teachers and give them the tools they need, and do not throw programs that don't belong in their classroom in their classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, and just a reminder to everyone here on the dais that we are voting the position. We're not voting how things are being run at this time. These are positions we need for our children to succeed, and that is what we're talking about. Is there any other discussion on this? Mrs. Principe, and then Mrs. McLaughlin.
I yielded to Mr. Lazo, but one of my concerns with this is continuing the funding for it. I mean, it's the Title IIA. We did not receive the funds last year. We're going to get them this year. I'm not saying we don't need this. I totally respect the decision here and what we need, but how do we fund this in the future if we don't have the Title IIA next year?
Well, we have Title IIA this year, so we're reasonably assured we will have Title IIA next year, but there's a myriad of funds that, quite frankly, are available next year. But I also think it's a matter of one of the things we have to look at with all of our grants, okay? Title I and Title IIA now are sort of merged together into sort of one mega grant. And we may have to look again and rethink the priorities we have for the Title I, IIA combined. And again, if we look at our scores, this may be a shifting of priorities for us, where this becomes a higher priority, and we have to look at maybe shifting some other things out of those grants. I think clearly the scores would indicate that it needs to be. I think that we haven't really looked at what Race to the Top is going to do in the future, but that's a grant that is a multi-year grant. Certainly, we don't know yet what is going to come down the road in ensuing budgets. Again, the fiscal cliff hasn't been solved, so we don't know what is if anything, going to come out of the federal government as part of that solution. But certainly the president in the past has indicated that education is a high priority of his. There may be other things that we have yet to see. But I think clearly this has to be a priority, and if we need to fund this out of grants in the future, then it means that this will be a priority in our future grant writing, and that we will have to shift around other things.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the job descriptions, and in fact, I see master's degrees and in 2 cases and a minimum of a bachelor's degree in another case. So I don't believe these are paraprofessional positions. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
In fact, I think when in looking for people to fulfill these positions, we are going to look for more highly qualified people. In other words, these positions, the LEP interventionists will be working closely with Dr. Jordan and working under her advisement within these classrooms to provide those interventions that we don't already. This is not just added people to do what we already do. These are new people to try new things with our students where it's not working right now. Same with the math. The person that will come in will be working hand in hand with Ms. Abate, our department head, to make sure that the interventions are really directed for the specific students in the classroom. It's very difficult as a classroom teacher to have 25 or 30 kids in a class where some are here and some are here. It's just impossible to reach all of those students. And this would give us the opportunity, particularly in those ELL infused classes and math classes, to get those kind of interventions for those kids that may normally not get to the level where they need to be.
Yeah, I just want to say that I initially wrote down a note that I had concern about the funding for it going forward. But bottom line is, I see a need. I see teachers that are here supporting that need, that obviously have concerns in order to bring this forward. And I'm kind of thinking about, well, let's use a sports analogy maybe. Say we had an opportunity to have Bill Belichick come and coach the Pioneers for a year. It wasn't guaranteed we'd have him 2 or 3 years down the line, but will we refuse to have some help in the interim of that kind of level, of that caliber? I think not. So I will be supporting this action tonight. Thank you.
Dr. O'Leary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to, I don't know if you can answer it or not, if anyone can, is on letters C and D, the interventionalist position. Ms. Allen had commented on the credentials involved in the pursuit of these positions. Are these positions paid at a general, in commiserate with experience and time in teaching? Or will they be on a par with a full teacher? And
They're paid under your teacher's contract, yes.
I guess thank you for that. And the second part of the question would be then if I'm hiring a middle high school science teacher, why aren't I hiring a middle school math teacher?
Essentially, you are, with a higher level of expertise and one that is going to be working specifically with students who are struggling in these areas in the middle school. This is a teaching position.
Will, if I may, will it help to, forgive my ignorance, will it help to decrease the student ratio, teacher-student ratio?
Go ahead, Amy. I'm going to yield to Amy Allen.
And when they're in that classroom. And what this does is it offers a little freedom for this person to be able to go into the classrooms that need this person at the time. There may be a time when a 6th grade teacher is having difficulty. They take the A1 or the A2 assessment and they see that their class is really struggling with these certain things. This interventionist can go in and work with them on those, but maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then on Tuesday and Thursday, another teacher's having something that they would like some help with or some co-teaching, or they're doing a big unit and they would like this person to come in and help some of their students and differentiate and work on some planning with them. This person will have the freedom not to stay in the same classroom every period with the same students every day, but to reach those groups that are struggling when they're struggling, and to help the teachers when they're struggling as well.
I guess my overriding concern is I wasn't part of it or on the committee at the time, but there was a time when a whole bunch of teachers had to get let go from budgetary issues. And it was at a time when we were abysmally failing many aspects. That's what put us into the spot we're in. And I think that part of what led up to the having to let go of 50 teachers was this idea that give another one will do it, this one will fix it, no, get that one, get this one, get that one. And I really have fear that if we don't move really slowly and cautiously, that it's going to be the same thing. You know, a couple of years from now, you're going to have the scores will do this. They'll be say, well, we don't need 4 teachers now. We need these other guys too. You know, I support what the teachers do. It's a tough job, and I commend every one of you. And it is the most important resource we have as the kids. And I am, as much as anybody, want to give whatever we have to make sure it happens. But my experience here has been, it is short sight after short sight after failure to produce, after pouring more money into it, and we're still right here, guys. So don't get me wrong. I want what everyone else wants, but I'm frightened about 4 teachers all at once. Boom, here we go. This is going to fix it, guys. I know it's going to be a cost to us down the road. I don't know if it's going to fix it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Leary. Mr. Lazo?
The reason I think the teachers are the most important employees that we have, although everybody is important, the person in front of the classroom gets it done. And I understand tonight we share frustration in personnel. We can't go into personnel on TV. Understood. If we as a school committee are not willing to study the whole problem, throwing money at it is not going to get it done. Our MCAS scores at the middle school area have not went up. Nothing to scream about. And the thing is, we need to study the whole thing. When Committee Member Domingo brought up we have to bring it back and have further discussion, I understand that we should discuss this. We have to, as a school committee, start dealing holistically with that whole building, what goes on inside the box. Throwing a teacher here and getting free grants to throw assistants here, I only can go by what you're telling me tonight. But what I'm hearing on the ground, you could throw all the teachers you want in that building and you still won't get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Lazo. Dr. Domingo, and then I believe there's a
Thank you,
teacher.
Madam Chair. This is like deja vu in so many ways. We have gone through the coaches of all sorts of denominations, and we just keep changing names and expect a different outcome. And I agree with Mr. Lazo. You know, until we fundamentally look at how teaching is delivered and hopefully one day stop slicing and dicing students into smaller and everyday smaller groups because they're different and they learn with different approaches and different capabilities, this is ADD approach to problem solving, and we expect a different outcome, and I don't know why we expect a different outcome. Nothing in its core is changing. And when I see interventionist position, this is very alarming. We shouldn't be hiring interventionists. We should be hiring teachers who can deliver instruction in a manner that will educate children. This is really pouring cups of water onto a huge fire, in my opinion. And it's much less, in my opinion, monetary issue, which is another huge issue in itself. But I don't think this is a wide educational policy to be troubleshooting problems with hiring more professionals with any kind of job description that anybody wants to come up. I really think that we need to go back to basics. If it takes us a long time I don't know how to fix it. This is not why we're here. We are hopefully here to enable professionals to do it in the right way, and I just don't think this is the right way. I've been here 7 years. I'm not from yesterday, and we have gone through this before, and before, and before, and nothing has changed. And I don't think if we do this, things will change. It's kicking a dead horse and hoping for it to get up. It's not going to happen. We need to figure something else out. Try something new, something different. And so I will not be supporting these positions either. Thank you.
Was there a teacher who wished to stand up and speak? At the podium, please. Just state your name and where you're teaching.
My name is Pam Abate, and I teach both sides of the building, 8th grade and seniors, and I'm currently the department head for both buildings, both sides, sorry. I just wanted to say two things that really concern me about this position. One is I feel it truly is in line with what we're working on with the Accelerated Improvement Plan with our response to intervention. I don't know how familiar you are with the response to intervention model and the student-based support teams we're supposed to be building. There's 3 different tiers, and currently I think we're doing very well at Tier 1 and Tier 3. Tier 1 is classroom interventions, and I feel as a teacher I've gotten a lot of training this past year on what to do and what kind of interventions I can do for the kids that are struggling when they come to me, like in 8th grade, and they don't have the skill sets they need to be successful from 7th grade. So I've received help. That's Tier 1. Tier 3 is all the way on the other end. That's special education. I feel like where we're lacking and we're not helping our kids is Tier 2. I really don't feel we have Tier 2 intervention at the school currently in this model. And so an interventionist would serve as a Tier 2 in the model that we're presenting to the state that we're doing. We don't have Tier 2. So an interventionist would support the classroom teacher. Let's say I had 100 students. I would contact my interventionist and say, you know what, I have 15 kids that came to me this year. They're in 8th grade. They really didn't grasp 7th grade math. Perhaps really didn't even pass 7th grade math. But as a whole, we're socially promoting the child and they're moving on to 8th grade and we're hoping to remediate the math skill. That interventionist would then pull that child out of, say, not math or a major subject matter, but maybe academic support, and really work with them to get them caught up. Because what we're seeing is we're pushing these kids along and we're not truly going back and remediating their gaps. And with the move to the Common Core, we are now taking this year and we're transitioning things that I used to teach in 9th grade. They're really moving down to 8th grade. And the things we used to teach in 8th grade are shifting to 7th grade. So we're going to see those gaps building this year, and we need to close the gaps. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank
yes.
you. Mr. Laza?
Ms. Abate, it's a breath of fresh air to hear it from a teacher, somebody on the ground. I think you articulated it very well. But you have confirmed my beliefs. They're not getting it in the 7th grade, so we're going to fix it in the 8th grade. Well, we're going to go to the 7th grade. They're not going to fix it. We're going to get fixed to 6th grade. So what I'm trying to say to the school committee is, holistically, we're throwing a position in the middle of the flow of education and say, we're going to fix it right here. What about where the problem is? We don't cure that. we sit here and again throw tax dollars at positions. I'm not saying this, after you explained it, I understand what you're trying to do. You're putting a Band-Aid on the problem that needs surgery. So what we have to do as a school committee, and I'm tired of hearing, it's not our job, it's his job, it's her job, it's the policy, we don't do this, Ed Reform said. We're supposed to be a team. From the top to the bottom, we're supposed to have the pulse of what's going on in those buildings and not let paranoia run wild and concentrate on the education of the child. The teacher is the most important person. And what you're saying here tonight is truth. But that's not solving the bigger problem, and that's my point tonight. Thank you.
Any other discussion? So I'd like to move on and vote this. Dr. Domingo?
I would just like to reply to Ms. Bate. It should not be the, really, essentially the same thing. The worry of the teachers in a particular grade, how to solve the problem of the knowledge that is not there when it should be, when the students get there. I think we need to start in the first grade, and the second, and the third. And if it's politically incorrect to not retain students who haven't mastered, well then let's just call it something else, but that's a fact, unless we stop this when it starts in all subjects. We have 8th graders that can't read. How's that possible? How did they get to 8th grade? This shouldn't be happening. We cannot fix these problems at every grade level for the holes that remain through the entire process. We can't, and I agree. You need help because your students just can't cope with what you're supposed to be teaching. I get it. But this is not going to fix the problem. Might fix 3 of your students, and God bless, I hope it does. But this is not a solution. This is not a sound educational solution, nor is it a sound financial investment of taxpayers' money. We need to decide how we're going to assure that kids are passed to appropriate grades when they're ready to be passed with the knowledge that is expected by the teachers who inherit them. Period. Again, I will not support this position.
Thank you. Mrs. Donovan.
Sorry, I just have a question, if you wouldn't mind, through you to Ms. Allen. When you gave your presentation at our last meeting, you focused primarily on, you talked about all the schools, but in your opinion, at this point in time of where this district is now, is this the block of students that needs the most help and shows the most weakness? Is this grade 6 to 8?
It is. It is. We looked at this as a leadership team before the data was presented to the committee, and we did discuss with all the principals from all the schools, all the directors, Mr. Wiggin, we did discuss that the middle school is where we need to nip it. Obviously, I agree with Dr. Domingo. We need to look at curriculum, at education, at what's going on in the classrooms holistically, starting from the ground up. But looking at the problems that we have today and the scores that we have to meet to stop being a level 4 district, there are some things that we can try to do right now when we have the money to try it. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't help, if we don't see any kind of progress, then we don't reassign this for next year in our Title II. It's worth a shot, I feel. But I do agree that we do have to start from the ground up, and I think part of the solution to that problem is going to be the new supervision and evaluation tool, and hopefully I'll be giving you a presentation on that very shortly. Mr. Wiggin and I are meeting with the union tomorrow to go over it, and I think we're pretty close. And I really think that is going to hold all of us as a district leaders, teachers, everyone accountable for student performance. And I do think that is going to change things, because it's not about seniority or tenure anymore. It's about your performance, and it's going to be about student achievement. If students aren't achieving in your classroom, you're not going to have a job ultimately. That's what the measures are going to be down the road. So I think that is going to really up the bar for all of us as a district.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yeah, just a couple more thoughts. So many thoughts, I say couple, so many. My gut instinct is math teachers know math is straightforward. There's no gray. It's either 2 + 2 is 4. It's not anything else but that. And I firmly believe that our MCAS scores from 2005 up to 2012 speak for themselves. There is no gray area of where our MCAS scores are. It is black and white that they are atrocious. Now, whether that atrociousness began in kindergarten or whether we fell off the ship in 5th grade or 7th grade, all of a sudden the ship capsized, the point of the matter is they're atrocious. And yes, we have been disappointed over many years by many of our leaders who have disappointed us. We put our faith in them, we hired them for a job to do, and they have let us down. And they have let the teachers down, they have let the town down, they have let our kids down. If we do not do something to show that we still have hope for this district, that we still have faith in the fabulous teachers that we have hired, if we still have, look at these, I'm going to cry, you look at these kids that stood before us tonight. How can you look at them and not realize that our youth deserves the very, very best from each and every one of us? There's no excuses, absolutely no excuses. And this has been something that I am passionate about, and this is why I ran. For so long, people have not been held accountable for the job that they have been hired to do, whether they were a building principal, whether they were a superintendent, whether they were a business manager. We have been let down time and time and time again. And just when we think, oh, we finally got the right person, they let us down too. And it has to stop. I look at this, we need something. Granted, yeah, we've tried things in the past and they haven't worked. But how can we sit here and say we cannot still keep on trying? There is no way I will allow it. I am here for everybody's kids, and I will not stand for sitting here and allowing their future. We have to give them everything we possibly can. Grant money, Amy is absolutely right. If it doesn't work, at least we tried. We're trying this after-school program. We've got kids on the bubble. We're trying every opportunity that's out there. We're trying parent forums. We're trying hiring new people. We are really doing everything that we can to make this district better, and this is just one more piece of the puzzle. So I say we need to do it, whether it's for an English language learner or an LEP or an interventionist or a coach, whatever the term is. The bottom line is our kids deserve it, they need it, and I support it. Thank you.
Mr. Lazo, this will be the last time.
I agree with the previous speaker 110%. You're the chairman of the school committee and the vice chair and the leadership of this committee. Mm-hmm. What are you willing to do? I really want to reconsider and vote in favor of this because of Ms. Abate that came up here and said what the problem is. We now have identified a problem and we have created a solution. I'm all good with that, and I probably will vote yes because she makes sense. What are we going to do as a school committee holistically to tackle the bigger problems at the middle high school? That's what I want to know. What are you going to provide as a leader of this committee? What is your agenda to stop that 7th grader? You know, there is a philosophy that there's a big disagreement in education about retention. To retain or not to retain. There are people that believe you stay back if you don't make the grade, because in the real world, if you don't make the grade, you don't get paid. So in this dilemma that we're having here in the system, I agree. I've been in it 29 years, and I've never quit a day on a kid. Never quit, not 1 minute. But the thing is, throwing good money after bad money is not a good way of doing things. We raise our taxes, we raise our fees, and you listen to some of the discussion of we have to provide services. I agree with that statement. But not to provide services and still spend the money, that's terrible, and that's what's happening. This here is a problem that could be solved, but we're not solving the big problem. And that I'm going to continuously say what the previous speaker said. She hit it on the nail on every point. Don't stop. We have bigger problems in that building that has nothing to do with this one vote here. We have a building under stress. We need to deal with all the issues.
Thank you.
Holistically.
Point of order. Let me answer your question.
Put your head in the sand on
I don't put my hand in the sand. I like the water. But anyways, Mr. Lazo, to answer your question, as the chair of this committee, it is my job to make sure that we are making the proper decisions and we are trusting the individuals that we have hired to do the job and do it correctly. There are always bumps in the road and that are being taken care of. It is not my job to run the teachers. It is our job here to make sure that the children are getting the education. We are here to vote positions that are being paid for under free grant money, which should not make any difference. If it doesn't work, we move on. I am not here to judge personnel. I am here to do the job as the leader, to talk with the super, to get things to be done. And it is not my job to micromanage anyone, because I do not have an education and curriculum, nor does many of us up here, I believe. Therefore, we put our trust in our acting superintendent, our acting new superintendent, whatever it is. I am doing the job to get that done, to solve that problem. Our administrators in the departments are working on solving other problems. It is not our job. Our job is to worry about the budgeting and worrying about policy and making sure that we are following what we're supposed to. I will not accept any more discussion on this. We are going to vote it. Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
No.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. The motion passes. The next one, vote to approve a middle school mathematics interventionist position. I have a motion by Mrs. Principe. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Donovan. I believe we've had plenty of discussion, but if there's anyone who wants to add something different to speak about the position we are voting, I will accept that. Mrs. Donovan.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Wiggin, I was curious as to who are, I don't even need a name, how the job description was created.
The job description was developed initially at the school level, and it was then reviewed by the math coordinator and ultimately reviewed by Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Allen, myself, and Central Office administrators.
Okay, thank you. Just a suggestion. I don't even know if it's important or not, but everywhere on this, it just says 6-8, 6-8. And if you read it quick, you think you mean that there's 6 to 8 classroom teachers that you're looking for.
Okay.
And I just really want to be sure that everywhere we see a parentheses 6-8, we put the word grade through there.
That's
just for a clarification purposes.
A very good suggestion.
Thank you. The second question that I had was relative to the education. Would it be preferable to have somebody bilingual? I don't know if any of the math teachers could answer that. I'm thinking that might be helpful. I don't know if that's something that we want to add to it. Not that it's preferred, but helpful, or, if we need to put that in there.
We put that in all job ads.
Put it in the ad, but not on the...
In every posting for every position that we put out there,
Okay.
we put that as a preferred. Yeah. We cannot dictate it by law, but we always put it out as preferred.
Okay. And then my final question, the job description that we have for the special ed teacher, the very end of it, under the preferred qualifications, the very last line, reporting relationships, and it says who that person will report directly to. That type of language is missing in both this interventionist position as well as the previous one that we just approved. And I didn't know, do we need to have that? Is that a requirement on a job description so that he or she who's applying knows what that reporting relationship will be?
It actually should be on all of them, and we will add that.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, a comment. Again, we received a presentation at a prior meeting about the MCAS results at the middle school. So this is not a new problem. I think what is new and different is that we have a new curriculum director who is working to tackle the issues. And I think she's come up with a new idea, a fresh idea in her mind, a fresh approach in her mind. She will certainly be monitoring it differently that's been done in the past. And I think if we show our confidence in her by supporting this request. And I would urge my colleagues to consider that. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, can we have a roll call, please? Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
No.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. Motion passes. E, vote to approve a middle school special education teacher position. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Donovan, motion, second by Mrs. Principe. Any discussion on the special education teacher position? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess through you to Mr. Wiggin, at what level will this teacher be teaching?
I think this is middle school, correct, Colleen? Yes.
Okay. And again, I have a couple issues with the job description. The first paragraph under essential duties and responsibilities, the last part of that paragraph says that,
It does.
you see that? I think we want to scratch that.
I believe it says Worcester Public Schools.
Ooh.
That's okay. We'll fix that.
And also under, I'm
Yeah,
sure
that's
that's
okay.
what happened, yes.
Not a problem. I missed it.
That's okay. That's all right. People pick on me for my pickiness. And number 1, responsible for remaining up to date. I wasn't sure. I just didn't understand what that meant. I'm not sure, is it maintaining up to date, or they want to just remain up to date with what's taking place? The first responsibility reads, responsible for remaining up to date regarding curriculum content. And does that just mean keeping abreast of what's going on with the curriculum?
What? Can you come up to the microphone, Colleen? Thank you.
I don't have the job description right in front of me.
Could be remain or maintain, I think, is the crux of the words.
Yes, well, I think that's a more general statement for a lot of specific things that are going on, particularly in our district. We're doing a lot of curriculum mapping. We're introducing supplemental materials. We're doing all kinds of different kinds of interventions. So it's a broad-based statement that has to do with specifics within the bill. We're not identifying what those curriculum mapping things are. We're not identifying specific curriculum. But it does require the special education teacher to remain up to date with respect to any curriculum initiatives or implementation that's going on.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Mrs. Culligan. Okay, I'm all set. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call on that, please.
Dr. D'Amico? I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't hear you.
Yes, sorry.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo? Yes. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe?
Yes.
Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. F, move that the Southbridge School Committee approve budget transfers in the amount of $1,539,135.04 as shown on the December financial report, page 12. Do I have a motion? Motion from Dr. D'Amico. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Lazo. Discussion?
Madam Chair, were we postponing this, or we had discussion?
We can do that now. No motion was postponing up here. It wasn't down in here. 'Cause
There was
the motion
discussion.
for postponing was canceled.
Okay.
So you would need to make a motion now at this time to postpone to postpone this to our next meeting after it goes to budget.
There's no need to postpone anything. We have approved all the positions. We can discuss this from now until cows come home. The money needs to be moved in order to justify the budgetary issues, and based on the projections, this is the only prudent thing to do. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, Mr. Lazo.
I too want to vote in favor of it now. I think we should, as I've been scolded to say, let's trust our professionals. I trust Terry. Let's give them the $1 million.
Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
Mr. Lazo?
Yes.
Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe? Yes. Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Agenda item 14 for unfinished business. A, third reading and vote to approve updated policy 1, community use of school facilities, file ECGR. I'm going to put this over to Mrs. McLaughlin because she's been with the policy, and if you have any updates or comments before we vote.
Madam Chair, the only change to this policy from the existing policy that had been adopted in April 2009 is that we're adding language that under Section 2, school facilities, originally it read, school facilities may not be used for individual or private use. However, now it will say the school facilities may not be used for individual use, but may be used for private or commercial purposes, following the adopted fee schedule contingent upon approval of the superintendent. The reason for that is up at the new school, if private enterprises such as dance studios or theater groups or something of that nature that is, would like to use that facility, that opens the possibility for them, where they would not have had that under the existing April 2009 policy. So that's the only language that was changed. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Donovan?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Wiggin. Is there a fee schedule on the horizon that will be attached to this approved policy regarding the...
There's a very extensive fee schedule and actually a new contract form that, again, on the agenda of the policy committee. When it comes up, I'd like to have reviewed.
Okay. Fee schedule, and what did you say? The actual
The actual
form?
contract
The
form.
application? Okay.
The actual contract form. It's actually Douglas had a very good model that we used.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other? So we'll need a motion to waive the third reading and to vote the approval of the updated policy. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Dr. O'Leary. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Donovan. Any other discussion before we vote? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Lazo? Abstain. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Dr. O'Leary?
Yes.
Mrs. Principe? Yes. Mrs. Woodruff?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Mrs. Donovan?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 abstain.
Thank you. Policy passes. Any other unfinished business at this time? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Wiggin. I just was, in preparing for this evening, I was thinking about whatever happened to the possibility of selling or the West Street property and going to Foster Street with our maintenance department. Did anything become of that?
It reminds me of something else I didn't put on my update. But the town manager and I right now have kind of put that on hold. I think, once decisions are made on acting superintendents and that sort of thing, I think we'll revisit that.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else under unfinished? Mr. Lazo?
Under unfinished business, I attended the basketball games, and teams look great. I mean, we've got some issues with some uniforms that the athletic director's working on, but the gym was supposed to have the refurbished banners from the old high school brought over to the new high school. It hasn't been done. There's also a policy decision of the school committee voted that Ed DeRush's picture and the previous Mr. Robertson donated pictures, and the principals were going to be hung in the library, which was voted a good many years ago. None of that's been done, and I think that we have difference of opinion. Somebody said the principal's pictures belong in the Hall of Fame. cabinets, which I don't know why. That's all athletics. So what I'd like to suggest is if we can get the Hall of Fame committee or some local people, I would volunteer to work with anybody, and maybe even if it's a budgetary problem, we have alumni that would like to help out in the refurbishing and hanging of the banners. We have a Hall of Fame committee that works diligently to not let go of the pride and tradition, and to entrust it to somebody that really doesn't know anything about it would be a flaw by Southbridge. So, Madam Chairman, I just want to bring it up to you. I'm sure that we can discuss it privately or with the superintendent as far as the workability. Some of the old ones are really tired and some of the new ones are fine. So just want to bring it up. Citizens have been asking. I noticed it. I said it's a lot of accomplishment of decades and decades of students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lazo. We will discuss that further, and I believe you said there was a policy about the principals being in the library, so I'd like to have the policy chair and the policy committee kind of look at that and see if we do have a policy on that. But yes, this is something we should discuss at another.
There wasn't a policy. There was a vote of the school committee. Nancy Swyaki was the first one that donated, Dr. Robertson, and I was on the school committee back then, many years ago, and they voted to put it in there. When the school committee votes to do something, it's equivalent to a policy, although it's not written in a book.
Thank you. I'll just look into that. Thank you, Mr. Lazo. Is there any other unfinished business this evening? Dr. O'Leary.
More in reference to a comment from earlier in the evening, is Faith, who does a wonderful job, missed on the winter track team. They had a meet at Tantasco in the field house last week and uniformly performed over and above all of the competition. They really, really excelled, and I want to make sure that that goes out. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else for unfinished? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. The next regular school committee meeting will be held on January 8th, 2013, council chambers. I also would like to add to the new business to inform the committee and the public that I have been working very hard alongside Mrs. Principe with our lawyers and else, but I've made several phone calls. I do have 2 candidates, which I will present the committee tonight with their job descriptions for the acting superintendent position, which we are looking for, and dependent on any of these things that are turning out, we'll go further from there. But I do believe that we do need to move forward on this, so I will hand those out this evening, and I will ask that everyone take a look at them, have questions, and then I will come up with a date where the committee can meet both candidates and then make our decision on the acting superintendent. And is there any other new business this evening? Mr. Lazo?
I would just like to wish the Southbridge school system in the town of Southbridge a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A few things. Tonight when we sat up on the dais, there was a copy of the Pioneer Press up here for all of us. That's new. I haven't seen that before. It's beautifully done by, I believe it's Mr. Nibel up at the school. Absolutely beautiful done. Notes from the nurse about flu. I love that. You know, some highlights of student achievement, a nice calendar, beautiful pictures. Very well done. I'd like to see this out in the community. As much as we can, bring some copies to the library or coffee shops. I'd like to thank Mrs. Byron and the Charlton Street students for their work this evening. That was really touching and very nice to see. This is really off topic, but this past weekend I went and saw the movie Lincoln, and if anybody has a chance to see that movie, please go see it. There are some historical lessons that are very appropriate for today's times and well worth seeing. And then I also would like to wish everybody happy holidays and good luck, to everybody. Peace, happiness for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for new business? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you. I just wanted to take this opportunity to personally thank Mr. Wiggin. He's had a lot on his plate, and in the times that I've seen him in action, I've been very impressed with his work ethic and his integrity, and he's really kept us afloat because we really could have sunk, a few weeks ago, and he still has a lot of work to do, we know. But I want to thank him, and I wish he and his family a happy holiday season, and I truly thank you for the work that you've done for us thus far. Happy holidays to our families, to our teachers, to everybody. And let's just make a resolution for 2013 to make things better starting today. Thank you.
Any other new business? Seeing none, agenda item 16, executive session. There will be no executive session this evening, so we will need adjournment, please. A motion for adjournment? Second. All those in favor? Thank you. Before everybody leaves, I have that information for you.